Hey, I love therapy, and in fact, I've been going to therapy since I was around 6 years old. Though I talk about therapy a lot and may interview some therapists on the show on occasion, nothing that is said in this podcast should be considered a replacement for therapy. If you are struggling, I urge you to please seek guidance from a therapist because you are absolutely worth it. Hello, everyone. You are listening to Wine, Dine, and 69, a podcast about dating, relationships, sex, and self-love. I am your host, Rachel Dalton, and I hope everybody's hanging in there. We are a week out from the election as of today, the 29th of October, and I don't know about you, but I'm kind of losing it. Kind of losing my grip on reality. Not really, but it feels like that sometimes when I get into one of those, spirals of what's going to happen if democracy is dead a week from now. Just, girly things. So yeah, I hope everybody's hanging in there in all seriousness. I know there's a lot of anxiety out there and that people are really struggling. I am too, to the point where I literally Googled election anxiety ahead of recording this so that I could maybe provide some semblance of help or control for people, and came up with this good article that Vox wrote that I will share, of course, in the episode notes. It's funny because my guest today isn't even American. She's Australian, so it's not even relevant to the rest of the episode, but it is super relevant here. Election anxiety. So, of course, you want to try to get to the root of why you're anxious beyond just, I don't want Trump. I'm making assumptions here about my listener base, but I don't think I'm that far off. Why don't I want Trump to win? Get to the root of your anxiety is point one. Knowing the causes of your fears can help you anticipate and gird against them. Gird, what a great word. Don't usually see that in journalism these days. Take control where you can. I've been practicing this quite a lot because there are a lot of things happening in my life right now that I literally have zero control over. And it's funny because that used to give me a lot of anxiety, but now I don't know if it's the coping tools that I have been working on, really diving into my self-love. You can see the last episode in my intro that I talk about all of the things that I'm doing for that. Still continuing doing those. But I don't know, there's something about just knowing that I can't control this and finding the control in the little places where you can, that does bring me some solace. It's just your toolbox of coping, your toolbox of mental health and self-care. Really, really diving into that right now. Another tip, lean into community. Now this is a little bit harder if, of course, you have family and friends who let's say their ideals of their candidate don't necessarily align with you or your values, but there's community somewhere, right? I mean, the internet has been around and it's an incredible thing. So there are people out there to support you. We're all here feeling really anxious about it. Even people who are not left-leaning are dealing with their own form of anxiety, as weird as it feels to think about that. They're dealing with their own form of anxiety as well. It's the opposite of our anxiety, but it is there, I'm sure. Caring for your mind and your body. I mean, again, this is the last point. It's the most important. You can only control so much. What you can control is how you show up for yourself. So whether that means taking a shower and just trying to feel the anxiety strip off of you, drinking more water, talking to a therapist, of course, talking to friends about how you're feeling, putting down your phone is a really big one. It's weird because we're in this period where you basically have a computer. I mean, you definitely have a computer at all times in your hand, but you don't need to look at it. And that might cause some anxiety in and of itself to not be in the know at all times. But after some time of allowing yourself that distance, you might find it helpful. I've really been leaning into election stuff this season. I've been reading The Fourth Turning, which is a book that I think that should absolutely be taught in every history, anthropology, sociology class. Basically this idea that in the world we have different cycles that we go through over and over again. I mean, historians, including my father, have been saying this for a very long time. Those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. And repeat it we do, but again, there might be some aspect of that is not in our control. So the idea of the fourth turning is that there are 4 different turnings throughout history, each one lasting about 20 years. And the first turning takes place after a period of crisis. Spoiler alert, that's the fourth turning. And so it's a time when people are coming together. There's more of a sense of community. Think about like post-World War II when the baby boom was happening, right? The second phase is awakening. It's when people start to kind of be less community focused and more spiritually focused or individually focused, awakening to the world around them. The third turning is the unraveling, which is when I was born into. Me and my fellow millennials were born into the unraveling. And the poor Gen Zers have essentially only experienced the fourth turning, which is a period of crisis. The good news is that the fourth turning, and I should also mention, this book was written in 1996. So really it feels a lot like prophecy. It's wild. I've been reading it and I'm just like, this is insane. Why isn't everybody talking about this? But the idea was that the fourth turning was going to begin somewhere around 2005 and end somewhere around 2026. So we're almost there. And that in and of itself, just looking at the cycles of history, gives me a little bit of hope for our future, knowing that this is a cycle that we've repeated over and over again, not just in America, but in the world. So one of the authors, the other one has passed away, one of the authors wrote a book last year called The Fourth Turning is Here. And that is, you guessed it, about everything that has happened since, I would say, it's a loose estimate that they said 2005. I'd honestly say September 11th, 2001 is when I would envision for myself where I kind of view the fourth turning beginning. And hopefully it'll end with some hope. The idea of the fourth turning is that it is crisis and chaos and can involve war, insurrection, pandemic. Sound familiar? But that the end of the fourth turning usually is a building and a coming back together so that you can enjoy that, the first turning of the high, and the cycle begins again. So every human being, an entire cycle takes place over the course of a basic general human life, 80 years, 20 years per turning. I mean, everybody should read the book. It's incredible. I'll link it in the episode notes. I cannot stress how mind-boggling this has been. I'm talking to everybody about it. So friends who are listening to this episode are going to be like, yeah, we know this already. You probably could have skipped ahead, but then you wouldn't get to hear my lovely voice. So yay. All right, we're going to keep this short today. I do have some things going on in my personal life, some exciting, some less so, but life is really busy and I don't have the energy to go into it. And some of these things are still unfolding. So I want to see if they unfold in the next month or so. And hopefully in the November episode or the December episode, I'll be able to give you an exciting update. Well, hopefully exciting. Maybe it'll be a mixed bag. Knowing my life and just life in general, it'll probably be a mixed bag of updates. But there are some exciting things that I'm working on and some other more anxiety producing things that are coming along in my life as well. So we're just going to see where the chips land. One of the big things I'm trying to do is to, as you know, if you've been here for a while, accept the cards that I have been dealt. And I really do feel like I am trying to make the most of them right now. And I encourage you to do the same over the course of this election season. We're all just doing the best we can. So support each other and do your best to take care of yourself. That's actually how my therapist signs off every single one of our sessions. She says, do your best to take care of yourself this week. It's not take care of yourself this week. It's do your best to take care of yourself. So I leave you with that. And now we're going to jump into a fun, light episode, which I thought would be nice and a good thing to release in this pre-election week. Today I have Missy on the show. Missy is a former phone sex girl in Australia, and we have a fantastic conversation, hilarious, about a ton of things, ranging from funny stories that she has that you can find in her book, Tales of a Phone Sex Girl, also to be found in the episode notes, but also what is intimacy and how sex work can be so helpful and beneficial in people's lives. We talk about being anonymous and how that's important in the phone sex industry. We talk about a lot of things, really. It's a longer episode, so I wanted to keep this intro relatively short. But yeah, with that. Oh, and I think I actually wanted to mention Missy does give her Facebook information in this episode. It's Missy's page. It's anonymous still. And I haven't got it confirmed yet, but it looks like she might be back to work. So if you like what you hear, check out her Facebook page and keep up with updates there. All right, I think that's all that I got for you today. With that, I'm going to cut to a quick commercial break that is going to be on theme, on topic, and then please enjoy my conversation with Missy, author of Tales of a Phone Sex Girl.
Hi, this is Sarah, and I created Guided by Glow. Have you ever listened to a guided meditation and wished that it would take a sexy turn? If your answer is yes, keep listening, because I made a treasure trove of erotic audio to hold space for you to feel deeply connected to your body and spirit while being sexual. All Glow sessions begin with a small drop-in to your body, your senses. Then they evolve fairly quickly into an erotic, climactic scenario spoken directly to you. If you like what you hear, we have so many more waiting for you on the App Store and on guidedbyglow.com. You can use the code PODCAST to access a month free of unlimited listening. We hope you enjoy. Please share with your friends. Tell us what you think. Rate us on the App Store. Help Glow's mission to create shame-free, judgment-free, erotic content. But first, pop on those headphones, take a deep breath, and press play.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I am here. It's funny how the world is. I'm here bright and early on my end, but it's super late on my guest's end. Today, I have Missy on the show with me. Missy, how are you doing today?
I'm good, thanks. It's about 10:40 here, so it's
I know.
Not too late, but yeah, definitely getting on.
Yeah, no, it's finding a time with guests who are over on that side of the world is always a little bit interesting.
Yes.
So I appreciate you bearing with me through that.
Oh, I appreciate you, being able to accommodate me. It's amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Well, today we're going to be talking about something that I don't think we've discussed on the show before, so I'm super excited to get into it. So why don't you tell me a little bit about you, and just as much as you're comfortable. I know that you are anonymous.
Yes.
And, and how you got involved into the phone sex work.
Yeah, so I'm Missy. I'm an author, and I just wrote a book called Tales of a Phone Sex Girl. So in 2017, and from 2017 till 2020, I was a phone sex girl. So people would call me up and I would give them phone sex. So that was a very interesting time in my life, and I'm just sort of reflecting back on it now.
It's amazing. I mean, and to be able to write a book about something that so many people have questions about. So how did you kind of get involved in that world?
So I guess it's a bit funny because I think it kind of started when I was quite young, like up when I was, maybe 17, 18, and I would see the ads on television, and they were on, late at night, and I'm a night owl. I've always kind of been that way, and, all teenagers are anyway. And I'd see these ads and I'd be like, wow, that just looks like really easy work. Like I'm really interesting. And so like I ummed and ahed about it when I turned 18. I was like, oh, I want to, every time the ad come on, I'd just be like, I want to try that. I really want to try it. Like I've had phone sex before, but like with boyfriends, because I was an online kind of kid. Like I was very into chat rooms, in Hotmail chat and all that kind of stuff. So I met a lot of people through distance, and I had some distance boyfriends and people I talked to on the phone, and so like I was always having phone sex, but and not realizing that you could make money from it until I started seeing ads, and so I had boyfriends and guys that I'd spoken to on the phone, and they were like, you're really good at this, and just ignored at me for a bit. So when I was 19, although this wasn't what started the journey, when I was 19 I just became like really fascinated by it, and I was like, okay, that's it, I need to see what this is about. So I contacted the company and I went to have an interview, and something happened in my family, and my grandpa was sick, and I had to cancel the trial that they'd set up for me. And when I called to cancel, the lady was really surly on the other end, and she was just like, if this is going to be a regular thing, then we don't want to have you. And I was like, well,
wow, okay.
Yeah. So I was like, well, I don't know, I was like, I didn't have much wisdom at the age of 19, so I didn't really kind of, step forward and be like, no, I really want to do this. Like, this is something I really want to do. Like, I was nervous, obviously, because I was so young as well.
Yeah.
And like, she was just like, don't bother, and then hung up on me. And I was like, okay, that was interesting. But then I was like, wow, that time I nearly became a phone sex worker. And then it kind of gnawed at me. And then I went through a massive breakup, and like how changes happen and things like that. I was like,
oh yeah.
I watched the ad and I was like, that's it, I'm going back to it. So I went back onto Google and Googled it, and I set up a trial and didn't have to call this time. I just set up a trial online, and that was the beginning. And they set you up with a trial, and they give you like about an hour. You have to accrue a certain amount of talk time, and you basically just got to sink or swim. You're in it, and then you've got to just take those calls. And they obviously slow the calls down that they send to you, but it's very like fast paced. Like, here's one call, here's another, and it's just sink or swim.
Wow. It sounds so fast, like all of it. And hopefully it was a different company that you had the trial with the second time.
I'm pretty certain it wasn't.
No?
I'm pretty certain, because there's only two major companies. Well, sorry, there was really only one major company back then. Maybe two, but there was one that just had everything. They just held the torch.
The monopoly.
Yeah, they had the monopoly. Yeah.
So hopefully the woman wasn't there anymore, though. She sounds like a not very empathetic employer.
Yeah, I don't know, but they loved me after the trial. They absolutely loved me. They were like, your talk time is amazing, you're doing really well, like welcome aboard. And I was like, yay, I was so excited. And it was just like, go from there. Like, it's just you'd log into the system online, you'd click on and say, be online now, take calls now, and then your phone would just get flooded with calls, and just one after the other, and it was like, you're just bombarded by call after call after call, and the only way you can have a break is between the calls, if they're spaced out enough,
right,
or basically you just had to kind of pause it and then stop the process, and then start taking calls again
when you're ready.
Yeah, when you're taking a breather. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that sounds very, very fast paced and very like you said, sink or swim.
Yeah,
so
very sink or swim.
You said that there's, at the time there was like one major company. What kind of restrictions are there? I'm in the US, obviously, and sex work is legal in one area. I think phone sex might be legal. I'm not sure. What's it like?
They made a lot of emphasis. So phone sex in America, I can tell you, because I've spoken to some PSOs since, kind of reconnecting with that industry a little bit. through the book, they are not allowed to talk about certain things. So they're not allowed to talk about like body fluids, like blood, and incest, and I think I can't remember the other thing, but it's mostly like so even urine as well. So they can't talk about all those kinds of things. So no golden showers and stuff like that. Whereas in Australia, because sex work is legal, pretty much everything we could talk about anything, and sometimes it would scare me because I would get criminals, I would get rapists calling, or people who wanted, like, who had that kind of frame of mind and like criminals. Like I'm not even going to say it because I don't even like using the words, but you can think of criminals like the other way as well. Yeah. There were a couple of, people that wanted to talk about criminal activity, and I would just shut them down. But there was no, the company seemed to be way more into the, like, never ever contact a caller, never ever do, as if like it was very industry and like very like central and based on like the idea of like clientele, basically. Like they weren't interested in kind of the workers and what the workers should or shouldn't be. And so that was a big reason why I left. It was the only reason. But yeah, like they were very just very focused on like making money and not really. So there was, the guidelines were more about, you must never do this, you must never do that. And I just remember being like, wait a minute, what about if they're talking about stuff that's illegal? Do I report these people, or what do I do? And I just took a moral standpoint and just said, I will absolutely not engage with these people, and I would end the call. But you have to end the call. There was a way you had to end it, so you had to press a certain button on your phone. You couldn't just hang up. And so the first couple of times I hung up on them, and I realised, that pulls down your call average, which means that you get less calls forwarded to you. So you never hang up. You had to like end it, like professionally end it, like from their perspective, so they could see you were just uncomfortable. But it was sort of set up in a way where you just kind of, they expected that you had to, if you wanted to make the money, you had to be uncomfortable. But I had my limits, and I don't regret it. Although there would have been times where I could have made money that I didn't, because I just said no.
Yeah, I mean, you stood up for yourself and you said, this makes me uncomfortable, this is a boundary.
Yeah, I mean, like, obviously the criminal stuff, I don't think anyone would engage with that, would want to if they had a soul. But even the other stuff, I had my limits with, like, coprophilia. I couldn't do that.
What is that?
Scat play, like.
Ah, okay, yeah.
Yeah, I prefer to use that term because it's like coprophilia, because it's like the clinical term.
Sure, yeah, it's a little less messy.
Yeah, just try to separate myself from it a little bit, because that was something that I was just like, I can't do this, like, at all. Like, no, thank you. And there was one other thing I couldn't do, which was like, I couldn't have a caller call me mummy. And now that I'm a mother myself, it absolutely like, I was horrified then. I'm now even more horrified. Like that, yeah.
Ooh, though you should just have a number for therapy for those people ready to go. Just be like, here's a therapist who specializes in Oedipus complexes. Yeah,
like there was quite a lot, and I felt sorry for a lot of them, but I sometimes because they were unable to get those other, like, I feel like they would have been hung up on a lot, let's be honest, that they have to kind of shape how they interact with the, the person on the other end, is like with the call girl. They have to shape how they interact. And so eventually I kind of would get them, if they were regularly calling enough, I could get them not to say, like, okay, we'll do this, but you're not going to call me mummy. And then we were just getting to some weird stuff, and like, I don't know, it was very difficult. I tried to filter it out.
Yeah, I mean, you figure out what you're comfortable with, and then you're like, I can do anything up until this point.
Yeah,
but,
absolutely.
I mean, there's something out there for everyone.
Yeah, like to be like a happy sex worker, and even though this is still the sex work industry, you have to know your limits and you have to be able to, voice them, because if you don't, then you are going to be unhappy. You're not going to get the best out of what you want from it. Why did you become a sex worker in the first place? Not to be miserable, obviously.
Right. But you want to enjoy your work to some extent.
Yeah, of course, yeah. So you've got to have those hard lines.
It's funny. I just started reading a book, and I didn't even think about the fact that we had an interview scheduled, but it's a book, I think it's called Phone Kitten. And it's about a woman who is a phone sex worker, and she ends up, by accident, meeting one of her clients.
Oh, yeah.
And ends up ends up getting murdered, and then she kind of jumps into trying to figure out who did it and everything like that.
Oh, wow.
It's a fun little read, Phone Kitten. But one of the things that I found the most interesting about that book and that story is people, they're calling for sex and that type of intimacy, obviously, but there's also people out there who are just kind of lonely and don't even necessarily want to talk about sex right away. They just want to talk to somebody. What was your experience with that?
Look, they weren't as obviously they're not going to ever be as common as the ones who are calling up for phone sex.
Right.
But, at least once a night, between maybe 30 or 40 odd calls, you would have this one caller who didn't want to talk about sex. And they just wanted to talk about their day. They just wanted the girlfriend experience. They wanted to talk about how they're feeling, their day. Maybe they don't want to talk about how lonely they are, how they feel like they can't ever get a girlfriend. And, sometimes they weren't gross, grumpy old men either. Quite a lot of those people who called had some type of disability. And so they would be struggling with, some aspects of intimacy or, struggling with being a prisoner in their own body, and so not being able to be out there and actually pursue a partner. And so this was kind of their only outlet. And so it doubled up as a sex, as the girlfriend experience. I was the closest thing that they had to a girlfriend.
Yeah. No, I find that interesting that and I think there's a lot to be said here about intimacy, emotional intimacy.
Yes.
And how men, don't necessarily have emotional intimacy with other people. They kind of, their partner is the main person that they have emotional intimacy with.
Yes,
obviously there are exceptions, but that's kind of the stereotype, right?
Yeah. I think that it's really important to understand is that I think what it comes down to with men and sex workers is that they don't feel judgment. And I think part of them knows that there's more tolerance, not just tolerance, but more there's more empathy and more understanding and more I don't know how to quite describe it, but this lack of judgment that they see in a sex worker is what kind of gives them the feeling that they can share anything with me. So I had some wild conversations, and one of the things that always blew me away was right around the time we had for gay marriage, we had a plebiscite in Australia. So everybody had to, the whole country had to vote to allow this to happen, so that it would, because they wouldn't do it they wouldn't put it in the constitution on their own. It was ridiculous.
Right.
The government spent millions of dollars on this plebiscite. And so around that time when it was coming up towards the plebiscite being, the votes being counted and stuff, I would get a lot of callers who were declaring to me that they were bi, and they said, I've never told anyone before, but and I don't think they actually were doing it because it was that time, and that was because it was kind of subconscious to them. That I don't think they were fully aware of that it was connected to the fact that it was because of the plebiscite. So I got a lot of coming out calls, as I like to call them.
Wow.
a lot. Like, I think I'm bi, and it's like, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with liking, there's nothing wrong with it. And
doesn't matter who you like.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it was quite an interesting experience too, because they kind of petered off right after the vote had passed, and now marriage equality we have marriage equality. We've achieved it. So
well, and that like that must make you feel really good that the calls, I mean, like ultimately it's less work, right? But I mean, I'm sure the other people with the other things made up for it, right? But like, it must feel really good to know that you were part of somebody's experience.
Oh yeah, hundreds of people. Like, I mean, I was just trying to think about it before I came on. How many people did I speak to in the 4 years? I mean, it's entirely possible that almost every call could have been unique. Like,
yeah.
I can't be certain, but I do remember up to more than 100 unique voices. I could definitely remember those. But, the ones that only called once and whatever, like, did I speak to nearly over 1,000 men? Who knows?
Yeah. Well, and that begs a question too. Like, was it strictly men that you talked to, or were there more like fluid gender, women, anything like that?
No, I mean, I always had women. I had women calling, so I would have lesbians that would call, and I would have like. It wasn't very often, but maybe once every couple of weeks, I would get somebody, a woman. A lot of the women who called, though, were not on their own, and it was like a form of like a threesome compromise with their husband.
I see.
So, like, a lot of them were like really cute and like really like nervous in the background, giggling, like, I can't believe we're talking about this kind of stuff, which I thought was really cute and pure, and just, like, it was nice of them to indulge in their husband's fantasies and things like that. So,
yeah. Up to a point which, like, they felt comfortable with. Maybe they didn't feel comfortable with a physical threesome.
Having that compromise. I mean, who knows? Maybe they went on and had it. Maybe they'd had plenty. Like, I have no idea. But just being part of that, and there was a lot of times they were saying, "Oh, this is the first time, like, we're thinking about having a threesome, and we thought maybe we could do this." And like, I felt it felt kind of special, for that as well.
Yeah, no, I love that. But I think like what's so interesting, and every time that I talk to somebody who is or was a sex worker, the most interesting thing about it is it's not just about sex.
No.
There are so many other human things that are happening. It's not just about physical intimacy, it's also about emotional intimacy.
Yeah, like and I think, like, it's inevitable because human beings are wired to connect and be intimate. So it's no accident, and it's no surprise that you would end up having like intimate interactions with people to the point that they would be cemented in your brain, forever. I mean, who knows? Like, I still think about callers, like, I mean, obviously more since I've sat down and recalled through the book, but
sure.
I still think about callers almost daily and go like, I remember that caller who did this or that, and I go, wow, like, that impact that they had on me. And I wonder, like, how many guys remember me? And they might, because I had regular callbacks.
Yeah. You probably, like, left an imprint on multiple people's lives.
Yeah.
And got people through difficult times, when they felt lonely, whether that be, physically lonely or emotionally lonely. So I always just find that so fascinating.
Yeah, It is fascinating. Like, that will be the next... And everyone says, "Oh, you're going to write another book." I'm like, "Oh, yeah, with time." But yeah, the next one will be about that aspect. I just thought, just to be a bit different, to kind of show the other side that everybody kind of wants to know, but is too afraid to ask.
Right. Well, what are some of the like safety things? Like, I mean, even when we were talking about this, you were like, "I'm anonymous. I don't do the camera and such." And I was like, "Oh yeah, totally." Like, your safety is paramount. And I think about the book that I'm reading and how, there was the huge rule, never meet up with your clients.
Yeah.
Never meet up with your clients. Because it is about your personal safety. So were there ever any people who like wanted to meet up, who you had to set that boundary?
Well, absolutely. Like almost every one of the callers who would call for the girlfriend experience, they would want my social media details. They would want other details. They were always wanting to know who I was. What do you look like, and all that kind of stuff. Like, they always wanted to know. And sometimes I was like, oh my God, I'm so glad I'm on like a secure line. Like,
yeah,
because I'd be like, they were sweet people, but you could just tell that it would be like kind of one of those like, baby reindeer kind of situation.
Oh my gosh. I just watched that a couple months ago. So good. But
yeah,
what a great comparison.
Yeah, I mean, like, I couldn't think of, like, there was obviously that's replaced whatever the comparison was before. I couldn't think of the old example, because this is the baby reindeer isn't the new one. I think it's probably, it's just overpowered every other example.
Like Fatal Attraction or something.
Yes,
I feel like that's a pretty big one.
I think you probably would have like, I probably would have said that had baby reindeer not been, so kind of iconic already.
Prevalent. What a good show. For people who haven't seen it, like, you should absolutely see that show. It's difficult at times. Like, you think that it's going to be like a thriller, and it goes into some pretty heavy emotional things. Oh, yeah. So there's a little bit of like a trigger warning there, but like, it absolutely is worth watching. It was a beautiful, beautiful piece of art. So totally recommend.
The actor's amazing. Like, she's just incredible.
Yeah. No, and she's super cool in real life, apparently. So
yeah.
I love that. Well, OnlyFans is a really big thing right now. How has the phone sex industry, and I know you've been out of it for a little bit, but how has it changed, or how do you expect that it's changed based on, the emerging OnlyFans and the internet, gaining such prevalence?
It killed the Australian phone sex industry. That, and also, but I think there's two big killers here. So you'd think it would be OnlyFans, but it's not. It was actually one of our main telecommunications companies, Telstra, had rights to all the 1-900 numbers. So these are the 1-900 numbers that you would call to your house. Like, you could call from your house, and you could, call out, and it would be essentially anonymous. Like, it's just going into a stream of like thousands of numbers that other people are not going to go back and trace,
Sure.
And so it was the 1-900 numbers where you could pick up your phone at home and just call, and it would be like $5 a minute or $10 a minute or whatever, but still you could do that. And that's disappeared now. Anyone who calls a phone sex service now must sign up with a credit card. And so what Telstra did is they quietly, and this was not public, like, it was not really public knowledge. It was very quiet. They just cut the lines one day, and it was in late 2019. So they just cut the lines, and that was when we were told we were getting a pay cut, and we were told, like, they're cutting the lines and all that kind of stuff. And that is just when I went from earning, top 85 cents a minute to potentially only earning 45 cents a minute to talk about poo. So I was like,
Ugh. Yeah. No thanks. Not worth it.
No thanks.
It kind of sucks the fun out of it, right?
Yeah, and that was kind of around about the time that OnlyFans started to take off, and I just don't think that helped it either. Like, it's barely breathing. Let's be clear. Like, if you looked online, like, they would profess that they are alive and well, but I would say there'd be like 3 or 4 girls that work for them, or maybe like a handful of girls, and they wouldn't get a lot of calls. And after that, I tried to contact other companies, and they talk, and I think they just didn't want to buy of it. They were just like, no, we're not going to pay them more, and that was it. So
wow.
If they ever hear it, maybe you should have thought about paying your girls what they were worth.
Yeah, because again, you're putting yourself out there emotionally, your safety, and then talking about things that maybe you're not necessarily the most comfortable talking about. Like, you're putting yourself at risk, like emotional risk and physical risk, multiple layers. So it really is, I mean, I always think that people should be paid what they're worth, but particularly in this instance, like, you're really putting yourself out there.
Yeah, like, I've never, but one thing people always ask me, like, like you asked me before, did you ever meet up with anyone? I was like, no. Like, are you nuts? These people, like, I was just, even today, I took some flyers around to some local sex shops, and I was like, I wore a surgical mask because I'm like, I don't want anyone to see I don't know. I had clients in my city, so I don't know where they are, and they don't know who they know, and you just never, you just never know. So I was just like, that's it. I'm going to wear a surgical mask, and I handed out my flyers there. So yeah, like, absolutely. It's not safe. I can't imagine anyone would want to, but I think, yeah, that was just kind of a no-brainer for me. I was like, no.
Well, I know this is a question you probably get all the time, but like, what are some of your most memorable calls? Like the ones that, you hung up the phone and you just like died laughing, or the ones where you hung up the phone and you were like, well, that was fucking weird.
I mean, the most memorable ones are in my book, and there's like 20 hilarious stories. But the very most memorable one is probably, and I kind of go between, like, just, I guess, they're also equally memorable to me because I've got a really great, extensive long-term memory. Like, it's really abnormal. So, but I'd say probably the most memorable is Mr. Exactly.
Okay.
And because his fetish was so unique, like, he wanted to be arrested for having bare feet out in public, and then he wanted to be told that he was a barefoot criminal, and that, he was going to go to jail, and that he was a criminal and a barefoot bandit and all this sort of stuff. And like, that was what got him, that was what really, turned him on. And he would and when you would reiterate that back to him, he would say, exactly, yeah. So you go, oh, you're a criminal, such a bad boy, you're going to go to jail, you and your girlfriend were caught out in public without your shoes on, you're a barefoot criminal, and like, you're a bad boy. And he would just go, exactly, yeah, yeah. And we just have to go in like this loop, and I'd just be like, oh my God. And like,
I'd probably be like, can you just come already? Like,
yeah. I mean, you kind of, when you're looking at the clock and the clock's ticking over, and you know that every time a minute goes, it's quite motivational. Like, you're like, oh, another minute's just gone past. I've just made 85 cents. Oh, another minute, 85 cents. I've just made another. And then before long, you're hitting the 40-minute mark. You're like, oh, I just made like $35. Like, you kind of,
yeah,
you just, if any time I felt like, oh, this is so fucking monotonous, I just look at the time ticking over on the phone, and I'd be like, yeah, I'm making money, I'm getting paid to do this. And so yeah, it was quite the motivator. But yeah, it was difficult to constantly have to hear him say, exactly, yeah, and kind of like the same kind of same thing in a loop over and over and over again.
Yeah. No, yeah, I get that. What was some of the more common kinks that you came across?
Well, one of the most common kinks, anal and golden showers.
Okay.
So
interesting.
And just very like always wanting to talk about like penetration, like, anal, and like, do I like anal, and do I have big tits, and like, so it's very kind of porn oriented in that way. And yeah, the golden showers was another thing, so much so that I had 5 characters, and one of them was for water sports. So I had specific clients who sought me out. I don't think a lot of, I don't know, because we didn't have contact with the other girls that were on the service. Like, they were my competitors basically. Like, I had to,
right, when
they were online, if I was online, you knew they were taking money from me, I was taking money from them, and it was like a game, So I don't know what kind of choices they were making in terms of, what calls they would take and wouldn't take. But I know that for me, the water sports didn't bother me, and I think that the callers really, like the ones who had that fetish, really leaned hard into it.
Right.
And
well, because it's so taboo, and they probably don't have anybody to try it with or anything like that. Yeah.
Although if anyone knew, it's just so common. Like, it doesn't even bother me because, like, squirting and like all that kind of stuff, like it was just something that I could indulge with, and it was nothing. But then, you know, asked me to try and indulge in body fluids like blood and period,
sure,
and farting, and I couldn't do it. Like, I'd have some guys who'd call up and they go, "Can you fart for me?" And I'd be like, I can't even fake fart because I can't. I was like, I would feel too stupid. I can't do this. I can't even fake fart. And I was like, I'm sorry. Like,
you're
like mouthing sorry when I'm hanging up.
Yeah, no, it's incredible, like how many kinks there are. Like, I mean, again, there's something out there for everyone, right?
Oh yeah.
But there are such taboos about so many of them, and so again, it's you giving a space for these people to explore something that they might be interested in, but they, you know, haven't had the courage to talk to a partner about, or they haven't met somebody who, or they haven't been able to try it. So again, like, I don't know, I think that sex work is such a public service, like, truly.
Yeah, like as I said before, like there's so many of the callers, like they had disabilities, and I felt very sad from them. I can't imagine being trapped in your own body, having I had a lot of callers that had cerebral palsy, you know, like they couldn't walk, or they were trapped in their own body, or they had like locked in syndrome type conditions. Yeah, they got like they would kind of be locked into their into their own world, and so they never really got to experience intimacy or sex. And a lot of them would say, like, I'm a 35-year-old virgin, you know, like the only sex I have is with myself. And I just can't imagine a life without having sex, you know, physical sex with someone. And so it was just, I felt, you know, it's definitely a public service in that respect. Like, I think a lot of people think, oh, they're just dirty old pervs calling. No way. Like,
no.
One of the reasons why we need sex work is it comes down to there are people out there who cannot have a partner for whatever reason. They wouldn't be able to give to a relationship in that way, but they need that intimacy, you know.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think I actually had somebody on the podcast maybe like a year or two ago who specialized in sex work for people with disabilities.
Yeah.
It's out there, you know?
Yeah. We had government funding. I was talking to somebody the other day who with a disability, and he said they used to have government funding, and I was really proud of it, but apparently they've cut it again. But we had government funding. We actually had government funding through something called the National, I don't know the long name, but the NDIS we call it. And we had the funding that was like, you know, funneled into it, and they could actually access sex workers to come to their home.
That's great.
Yeah,
there needs to. I mean, that's great. Like,
it was.
People need that,
but now it's been cut. So.
Ugh.
I know.
Well, I mean, did your loved ones know about your work? Was it something that you kept a secret?
So I guess like for some certain, like my sibling doesn't know. I had another sibling who is the reason why my parents ended up finding out. But
oh, lovely. Thanks.
I don't. But the whole family's kind of estranged from her, but not for that reason. But as you can see, she's not that great of a person anyway. So she was kind of trying to out me, and it didn't get the response that she was hoping for. So my parents were incredibly supportive, and when my dad found out, he came to visit, and we went to the shop and bought a nice new phone and headset. So my dad was supportive.
That's amazing.
Yeah. I love my dad's.
That's incredible.
My dad's
more parents like this.
My dad's so ridiculously proud of me, and I'm like I'm actually a microbiologist, you know, in my day job, and I swear he's more proud of me for writing a book than he is for the papers, like scientific peer-reviewed papers that I've published. I'm like, Dad, I'm already a published author. And he's like, yeah, but like, I'm so proud because you wrote this book, you know, like, they're just, my parents are ridiculously supportive of it. And my dad's even like, oh, I wish I could read it. It's like, but it'd be too weird. And I was like, I know you're dying to read some of it, Dad. He's like, God, if only you were, he's like, if only you weren't my daughter, I would love to read a book like that. And I was like, I know, I'm sorry. But yeah.
I wonder if you could like pick different, like the least, not like creepy, but the ones that a dad would find like funny. But
yeah, like Mr. Exactly. It's very PC. Like it's it's kind of like, yeah, it doesn't have like any explicit kind of stuff. So I think I've said to Dad, I was like, look, I've told him a little bit about Mr. Exactly and how, like, even another thing I don't tell everyone, but my partner, he actually wanted to hear a call one time, and I was like,
oh, okay.
And it was that one, and that's the only call he ever heard. He was like, I just want to hear it. And I was like, okay. And then I was like, but you might not get an interesting call. Like, it just could be like one of those like 5
luck of the draw
calls. Yeah, like just like a, you know, wham bam, thank you, ma'am. And he got Mr. Exactly. We got him, and so he's on the other side of the door with the headphone, with one side of the ear of like an iPhone 5, like the old school, like, you know, the old school headphones, and he's got one from one side and I'm on the other side, and yeah, he heard Mr. Exactly, and I was like, what a fucking fantastic, you know, what a call to hear. And then he just like, I'm done. He's like, I'm done. I've heard it all. He's like, I'm done. So yeah, I could tell that one to my dad, but I've said to him, like, you know, I could pick out a few stories, but I was like, he's like, oh, yeah, you know, like typical kind of Australian dad. He's like, yeah, no, I don't know. I really do want to. He's like, I'm just really disappointed that, like, I was like, well, maybe there's other books out. And then I was like, nope, that's not right. I'm the one. My book's the best, okay? Mine's the funniest. Mine explores the avenue that, and you know, a lot of those books on phone sex, they always focus on the caller and like their sex life and like how kinky they are, and or their, you know.
Yes.
Whereas this is just my clients and the callers, like, this is what it's like, play by play, minute by minute.
Yeah, which I think is interesting because, like, yeah, it's one thing to make it about the callers, but it's like, no, this is what it's like on my end of the phone line.
Yeah, like, everyone's like, what is it like? And I'm like, let me take you on a journey. Because people keep asking me all the time, you know, over the years, and I'd be like, oh, it's so hard to explain, you know. And then, like, people would be like, oh, were you doing other things? I was like, certainly not. I was focused. Like, this is a job. Like, if you have any hint that you are not interested at all, you might think that you're giving off the vibe that you're interested if you're not interested, like, and that you're focused on it, but they know. Oh, the callers, they know. And they'll end it. If there is even one iota of doubt that I am not fully focused on them, they would end it.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I mean, I always think about like phone sex, about like guys being like, what are you wearing? And you're like, oh, I'm laying on my bed in like a Victoria's Secret, like not negligee, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, no, I'm wearing sweatpants and like eating Cheetos. Like,
yeah, like that's pretty much like, but I wasn't doing anything. I was just basically laying there in my pajamas, you know, just like laying there, or in a big baggy t-shirt.
Yeah.
Just like my, the cover of the book, that's based on an actual photo of me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Doing the work.
Yeah, well, yeah, like my partner caught me one time, like I was in the other room, and he came down the hallway and he's like, what is that noise? And I was standing there in heels making like clacking sounds and clicking around for one of the clients. I was like, fuck it. I always get money from this guy. I'm going to wear heels for real.
Oh my God. Yeah, heels and stockings. That's a big thing too.
Yeah, like I was but I really literally was this time. Like I was walking around and clopping around in heels. Like, fuck it. I'm going to be, nothing sounds better than actual heels. And I'm going to keep this guy on the phone. And he was true. He was enamored. And like the guy on the other end was just, oh my God, I reckon he must have creamed his pants twice. So it was worth it. But my partner comes down the hallway. He's like, it sounds like there's a herd of elephants down here. And he is me in this baggy white T-shirt wearing these ridiculous, I can still remember it because like I'm in the same room that I was, at the time. And just, I remember being like nearly falling over at one point because I'm like clapping my feet so hard. And then I remember just like squatting in the heels and then my partner comes in and I'm like, hi, I just made such a...
Just a normal day at work.
Yeah, I'm like, I just made $60 or something. Yeah.
Is it, that begs another question that I have. I know that, when there's this idea that, well, it's not just an idea, it's a fact that sometimes when you do something for fun and then you start doing it as a job, it loses its fun. And, you can answer this as much or as little as you feel comfortable, but how did this work, impact your own life personally? I can imagine, not wanting to, just being less interested in sex because it's, my job. You know what I mean?
I think it comes down to, for me, I didn't lose interest. There were definitely times where it was like, oh, not this caller again. But I always knew it would end. And I always had that kind of philosophy in my mind, like this call's going to end and there's going to be a good one next, and there's going to be another one. It's going to be better and better. So it's kind of like, I guess it's kind of a bit addictive in the sense of like people who work in sales, like, well, that doesn't matter because there's the next sale, you get the next one, and it's kind of like that, like you're going to win. So I never really kind of felt like it was losing its joy. And it might have just... I think you have to be eclectic, but also it was kind of a challenge and a game for me. Like I'm quite an intellectual, so I kind of played my own intellectual game with it. And I think the biggest thing that I take away that I could, I achieved during that time and what kept me going was also I was a fucking good actor by after the first 6 months. Man, I was really good at improvising. I was a really good improv actor. And I could feel it because, there's nothing more affirming than having, that you're a good actor, than having a real person and keeping them aligned until they come. You have to be good at what you're doing.
Yeah, the stakes are high.
Yeah, people aren't going to keep calling if you're not going to do what they want. If you're not going to get them off. So yeah, after 6 months, I was like, fuck, I'm a good improv actor. So it was really uplifting and really a really good ego boost. And every now and then you just be like, God, I just pulled that off, and I was bored as batshit. And you just think, my God, I'm good at this.
Yeah, it sounds like for you, it really, it didn't lose its joy at all.
No.
It was the perfect challenge for you.
Yeah, I really, you gotta, who can you keep them on the line for the longest, How can I keep them going? How many times can I get this person to call? I'm going to keep them going. I'm going to give them something to think about. It became so scientific to me. I really got into their brains and I made an impression and I really held on to them, and then you held on to them until they just couldn't hold on anymore. I feel bad in saying this, but I probably sent a couple of them broke. But that's what you get when you call Missy.
Yeah. Oh, that's that's actually a great tagline. Yeah. I love that. That's what you get when you call Missy. Well, kind of question, just general, what were some of your favorite parts of your job? And I know we've discussed a lot of it, and I think I know the answer to it. It's a lot of what we just discussed. Yeah. And what was the least favorite parts of it? When you compare and contrast the parts that you love versus the parts that you disliked, what do you come up with?
The least favorite was probably because sometimes there was no substance with the calls and it would just wanted the same thing. It was vanilla and it wasn't innovative, and it was just oh yeah, you want me to same kind of like vanilla sex basically, and repeating vanilla sex. I guess that was kind of things I didn't like. I think it was a bit of a time stealer at times. I would always be I want to spend time with my partner at certain times of the evening, and then I'd be like, God damn it, this is peak hour. I could be making hundreds of
Yeah.
dollars. I really want to spend time with my partner. But then, like, so there were a lot of compromises in that way. Like, I was like, I have to do this. And he's like, it's okay, babe. Like, I understand. I'm like, I know, but I don't want to. And then some nights I'd be like, I'm not doing it. I don't care. Like, I need to take time off because it's you know, it's there all the time. Sometimes if I was, you know, I wasn't at my day job or whatever, because I was part-time and I was in between jobs and stuff like that with other, you know, kind of stuff, I'd be like, oh my God, it's the middle of the day. Why don't I start taking calls? And like one time we went on holidays and I took calls when we were on holidays, and like my partner, he would go out. He likes hiking, and so like he would go out and he likes like hiking on his own, and I'd be like, you know what, I'm gonna stay here and take some calls.
Yeah, you do that. I'm gonna do this.
I missed out on things, you know, and like because my parents knew, I would say, oh yeah, I'm not going to stay, or like I'm going to do this, or I'm going to go and I'm going to take calls. And so yeah, there were times where like I would even take calls when I was on holidays with my parents because like they were in bed and I'd be like, I'm going to take calls tonight, so you know I'm not. And it was just kind of became things like, are you going to take calls tonight? And I'd be like, oh yes. So yeah, there was times, but as soon as I connected, it made me realize like I'd be connected to the service, I'd get that good call, and I'd be like, you know, this is all right. Like I'm making money. This is the way that it has to be for now, you know. And so it was just things you didn't
Definitely.
but you just had to kind of get on with it like everyone else, I guess. I'd rather that than doing something I hated.
Exactly. And I think that's the beauty of it is you're like, okay, like there are multiple facets to it. I'm providing a public service. It's different, you know, it's a different type of thing.
Oh, yes.
And there's that like gamifying that you did that also makes it more challenging for you.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, you wrote a book, so like there's a lot of substance to it. It's not. I think people think of like, you know, phone sex is like, oh, it's just this thing, but like it's not. Like it's.
Oh my God, no.
Like any type of sex work, like there is so many layers to it.
Not just anyone could do it either. Like if I mean, just like not just anyone could be an escort. I mean, I probably could be an escort, but who knows? Like I might not have what it takes. You don't necessarily know. Like I know what I'm good at in the industry, and you know, you have to kind of know what you're good at, and not everyone can do this. Not everyone can be a phone sex worker. Like people think that, you know, it's just like having phone sex with your boyfriend. No way, honey. It's not like that at all. Like you have to be so on the ball. Like it's improv. You have to make sure that you are able to keep them on the line. It's just not something anyone can do. And you have to be able to do it. You have to be able to act well enough that even if the things that you don't like, and I'm not saying about what your limits are because you don't take those calls if you have those limits, but the things that you might not necessarily be in the mood for, like, oh, I think one of the biggest myths is, oh, you know, phone sex workers, they're just like constantly horny and constantly masturbating. It's like, oh my God, I didn't even feel aroused. Like,
no.
Literally not once, because it was a job to me. I mean, it was fun. Yeah. And I got like psychological arousal out of it, but not, I never got aroused. It was just like, no. And people were like, oh, so there was no time to be aroused. To be aroused, I have to think about myself. Like I wasn't thinking about myself at all.
Well, yeah. And to be aroused, you would have to be not playing a character. Like, because like you would have to be yourself in your own body. And yeah, I mean, like much to your probably client's disappointment, you probably like, oh, she was just acting aroused. She wasn't actually aroused.
Yeah.
Bummer.
Yeah, a lot of people are like, oh, you just burst my bubble. I'm like, well, like, you need to know these things, because a lot of people think there's this tired old stereotype of like, you know, oh, phone sex girls, they're just like whores for the phone, and then all they do is masturbate all day and they've got vibrators and stuff. Like, you kidding me? Like, sometimes I would even like put my phone on vibrate so people thought I had a dildo. Like, you know, I would, like, my electric toothbrush is a classic example. I would just
like, I think the person in the book uses that in the book that I'm reading, the fiction book.
I mean, they're fucking fantastic, but I still wasn't putting it on. I wasn't putting it down there.
Yeah. No, and I mean, it's also, there's this part of me that's just like, oh, you think you're so good that like I'm actually gonna
Exactly.
do this. No, it's like my job. This is my job. Like
Yes.
you're not all that. Like I'm
That's
literally just sitting
right.
here in my PJs.
You would
Like,
I would get callers that would be like, yeah, but I'm different. And I'd be like, oh, of course.
no, you're not.
Like, yeah, baby, of course you're different, like.
I'm different from your other clients. Yeah.
Yeah. And look, there were some that I would be genuinely saying you're different and you're special and I enjoy talking to you. That was not a lie. Like if I express to like those callers, like, they're sweet, and I would say, like, oh, I really love talking to you. That wasn't a lie, but yeah, was I hammer and tong, jamming that thing in all that? No. Flicking the bean? No. Was I even wet? No. Like,
well, yeah, the ways in which they were different was probably more emotionally rather than, in the physical realm.
Yeah, exactly. Like, there's different types of intimacy, and I think people don't necessarily understand that.
Well, Missy, where can people find you? I know you're anonymous, so if you have any profiles that, are for Missy, and where can people find the book?
Well, you can find me on Facebook, Missy XD, and I've got lots of friends, and you can friend me, and you can find my book on Amazon KDP. It's an ebook, so you don't have to have Kindle. You just have to download the Kindle app. A lot of people ask me, oh, but I don't have a Kindle. I'm like, that's okay. You just download it.
Nice. I didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah. So you just download the Kindle app. I feel like Amazon's really failed people there by not explaining that, because they probably, well, I don't think they care about customers anyway, but yeah, you just download Kindle, and then my book, it's like, I think is it maybe $2.99 US, I think. Yeah.
Nice.
No, is it? Yeah, $2.99 or one. I can't. Sorry, I don't know the exchange exactly because it's changed.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, it's quite cheap, and it's a short book, and every story is about, like, there's every chapter is a different story, and they're only about like 1,000 words long, so you can read like one in that moment, and then read another one the next, and that is kind of, you can break it apart, and every story is individual. And apparently it's really funny, and I didn't know I could be so funny, but yeah. So I also have TikTok, but I'm trying to work it out. I'm a bit of an old school millennial, so I'm just kind of still trying.
I feel ya.
Man, like, they want everything to be live, and I don't want to show my face, so how do I do that? But yeah.
Right.
So
just like carry around like a masquerade mask all the time.
Well, I have one, but then somebody pointed out, I might be able to identify you, and I was like, oh, I'm scared now.
Oh gosh.
So yeah, like, I do have TikTok. I'm very active on Facebook. You can message me on Facebook, and I'm doing a deal at the moment where, well, I'll probably do it forever, but where if a guy leaves me a review, or a girl, whoever, then I'll send them a sexy voice note. So
love that.
They can hear my voice and get a bit of an idea of what they could have had, and
what the experience was. Yeah.
So that's what I'm offering, and I've sent a few sexy voice messages to some guys. So that's something I offer as well. And you can look. I'm very approachable. Just like my page, share it. Just help me get my book out there, because it's hilarious. It's fun. It's unique. It's different, and that's what's important. Like, just it's unlike anything you've ever read before. Let's just put it that way.
Amazing. Yeah, well, I'm definitely going to download it. Going to be on finish this novel that I'm doing, then I'll jump into the real thing. It'll be great.
I can't wait.
Missy, thank you so much for being here today and for sharing your stories. It's been incredible, and it's a topic that I think a lot of people have questions that they want to ask, but they don't know how, or they don't have somebody to ask them to. So thank you for answering a lot of questions that I had, and that I know a lot of other people had as well.
It's my pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
Awesome. And thank you, everyone, for being here and listening today. You've been listening to Wine, Dine, and 69. I am your host, Rachel Dalton, and let's keep talking.